Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leeahd. Feels like it's been forever since I've done one of these voiceovers. So let's get into it. Today I wanted to talk about the idea of fighting our own artistic inclinations. It's something I wrestle with all the time, and I'm going to tell you a story about how it popped up recently in my painting practice. By the way, today's painting is a 9x12 oil painting on wood panel. If you fall in love with it and want to give it a forever home, it's available for purchase on my website. I'll drop a link in the description below if you'd like to check it out. So picture this. Last year, I was running low on some of my paints, so I ordered a big tube of bismuth yellow and quinacridone rose. I was excited because I had some ideas brewing for vibrant new pieces, but when my package arrived, I opened it up to find a giant tube of quinacridone rose, but no bismuth yellow. Instead, there was a big tube of burnt sienna. I mean, okay, happy accidents sometimes lead to cool discoveries, right? Luckily, it wasn't an emergency. I could wait for them to send me the correct paint, and as a bonus for the mix-up, they let me keep the burnt sienna for free. Like I said, happy accidents, right? Now here's the thing. I have a very complicated relationship with earth tone pigments like burnt sienna. On the one hand, they're usually cheap, which my wallet appreciates. They are super useful because the world is full of browns and grays, and they're perfect if you want your paintings to dry fast. But on the other hand, they dry fast. They dry so freaking fast, oh my god, who wants their paints to dry this fast? And it's not just on my canvas, which is bad enough because I want my canvases to stay wet for longer, not dry faster, but it dries on my palette too and makes all my mixes dry as well. It drives me absolutely nuts. I have tried every trick I know. Slow drying mediums, slow drying oils, clove oil, keeping it sealed in an airtight container, putting it in the freezer. But short of submerging the paint in water, nothing keeps it from drying out by the next time I pull out my palette. This is one of the reasons I have banished earth pigments from my palette. Does anyone else have this problem with earth tones, or is it just me? Let me know in the comments if you have any magical hacks, because I would love to hear them. Anyways, back to burnt sienna. It's a beautiful color, and honestly, I'd never really used it before. I'd used burnt umber, raw sienna, but for some reason, never burnt sienna. So I thought, why not give it a go? And here's where fighting my inclinations came into play. I decided I wanted to paint a monochrome piece using only burnt sienna because it is such a lovely color. But there's a specific way you have to paint to bring out the true beauty of this pigment. For darker values, you lay it on thick. For lighter areas, you either thin the paint down to a translucent wash or rub some of it off with a medium. Basically, you're working transparently. So the light reflects through these delicate layers of pigment and lets the white of the painting surface shine through. But here's the thing, and this is very important. The second you start mixing white paint into it, it loses that gorgeous vibrancy and goes kind of chalky. But here's the rub. I don't like to paint that way. Rubbing away paint feels way too much like charcoal drawing to me. There's just something about it that doesn't connect with how I approach oil painting. My painting style is all about the push and pull of the paint. I love adding paint, carving shapes, adjusting values, working back and forth until things feel right. Using a solvent or a rag to rub out the paint to make something lighter, it just messes with my flow. It feels weirdly restrictive and honestly a bit stressful. So the question becomes, should I fight my own inclinations and push through? Or should I just let myself paint the way I like? And that's a tough call. Is it lazy to give up and go back to what's comfortable? Probably. Maybe. I don't know. But it's always better to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, right? That's what people say. You gotta push your limits, push your comfort zone, stretch. I say that too all the time. So that's a good thing, right? Well, not always. Because it depends on the specifics. Like there's a ton of things that are outside of my comfort zone that wouldn't necessarily benefit my art or me or my sanity. So even though that's something that people like to say a lot, realistically, it's not always beneficial. For example, it's not like I've never worked subtractively. I've definitely made art where you create light areas by rubbing away pigment. I've done a ton of charcoal drawings where you lay down a general tone and then you use an eraser to lighten up certain areas and you put down more charcoal to darken other areas. For some reason, that feels super intuitive to me with charcoal, but not so much with oils. So what did I end up doing with this Burnt Sienna painting? If you've been watching, you might have noticed. I cheated. Instead of sticking to pure Burnt Sienna, I pulled out my trusty CMYK palette. I added yellow and a bit of rose and some white to match the lighter tones I would have gotten from the translucent Burnt Sienna. I also used black and blue to darken and cool certain areas down. And I threw in a bit of rose to warm up the midtones for some extra richness. Don't get me wrong, this is mostly a Burnt Sienna painting, but I did supplement it with my CMYK palette. Basically, I made it work my way. And you know what? I am totally okay with that. I think it's important to acknowledge the things we love doing and lean into those. If I truly loved painting monochromes in a subtractive way, I'd be all over that. But I don't, so I have to find another way. For me, a perfect example of the same idea is plein air painting. If you don't know, plein air, if I'm not mistaken, is just French for in the open air. It just means painting outside, basically. Usually landscapes. And listen, I'm not the best landscape painter in the world, but I'm an even worse plein air painter. Painting outside is so freaking hard. The light changes every 7 minutes. The wind tries to knock over your easel, bugs decide you're the tastiest thing in the area, and I sunburn faster than a vampire at a beach party. Surprisingly, one of the hardest things when painting outside is the excessive amount of light. It is shockingly hard to see your own painting and judge your values and colors with all the light and bounced light from everything. Every time I go plein air painting, I feel like I should bring a few of my other paintings along, just so people know that under certain circumstances, I can actually paint. Because you wouldn't know it based off of my plein air paintings. Could I become as good at plein air painting as I am at portraits? Absolutely. In theory. So should I force myself to do it until I reach that level? I'm not so sure about that one. Because I don't find landscapes nearly as compelling as figurative work or portraits. And without that genuine curiosity and drive, I'm not going to fight my inclinations enough or with enough consistency to get there. At least not right now. That might change in the future. To be clear about something, when I say I don't find landscapes as compelling as figurative work, I am talking about as the painter. It's about the experience of making the painting, not the experience of viewing or appreciating the painting, because those are very different things. There are a ton of artists that paint subject matters or in a style that I might not, and I love their work. Sometimes I love them more because it's a style I will never touch. Now to get back to the subject, here's a counter story. Years ago, I used to draw and paint super tightly, and I wanted to loosen up and paint more painterly. It was so hard at first. Every instinct told me to stay precise and controlled, but I pushed through, fought my own inclinations, and eventually loosened up my style. And you know what? It became easier. It became more enjoyable, and it opened up a whole new world in my art practice. So sometimes it's definitely worth it to push through that discomfort. And sometimes it's totally okay to say, this just isn't for me right now. And I think that's such a personal decision. So I'm curious, what about you? Are there things in your art practice, or even outside of art, that you feel torn about pushing through versus leaning into what feels natural? Are there areas where you've forced yourself to grow and it ended up being worth it? Or maybe areas where you realized, nope, not my jam? Let's talk about it in the comments. I love hearing your stories and perspectives. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell so you don't miss any future videos. I've got more art adventures, stories, and probably a few paint rants coming your way. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and as always, happy painting.